The Ardennes in winter is a place that remembers. Even now, 80 years after the snow ran red in the winter of 1944-45, the forest keeps its dead close. Beneath the pines and the fog, hidden under layers of NATO concrete and classified earth, lies Fort Bastogne, an underground logistics and training complex built in the late Cold War, directly on top of the old German siege lines. Most soldiers who rotate through the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team out of Elizabeth Training Area just call it the bunker. Officially, it doesn't exist on any public map. In December 1944, the 303rd Field Artillery Battalion, an African-American unit attached to the 106th Infantry Division, was overrun here during the opening hours of the Battle of the Bulge. Nearly an entire battalion, over 400 men, vanished in the first 2 days of the German offensive. Official records list them as KIA or captured. But the locals, the old Belgian farmers who still find rusted dog tags in their fields, say something else. Some of those men never left the forest. They went under the ground, and the ground never gave them back. Fast forward to 2018. American rotational units are living 6 levels below the same ridgeline, in a facility the Army swears is just cold storage and a backup command post. Lights flicker, motion sensors trigger in sealed corridors that haven't been opened since 1989. And every December when the temperature drops and the fog rolls in thick enough to swallow sound, soldiers start hearing voices, old voices, calling out fire missions in 1940s radio procedure. This is not a story about ghosts in the traditional sense. This is a story about men who were ordered to hold a position that no longer exists on any map, and who are still holding it. What you're about to hear comes from 5 separate soldiers, officers, and enlisted across 3 different rotations. All of them asked that their real names not be used. The Army denies everything, but the recordings, the photographs, and the missing persons reports don't lie. This is their testimony. Chapter 1. The First Night in the Hole. My name is Specialist Daniel Reyes, 166 Armor, and I still remember the smell of that elevator the first time it dropped us into Fort Bastogne. Cold iron, diesel, and something older underneath, like wet earth that had never seen sun. They told us the place was just a backup logistics node, a Cold War relic the Army dusted off when the Russians started acting up again. 6 levels deep under the same ridge where the 333rd Field Artillery Battalion got wiped out in December '44. Nobody above the rank of E5 ever said the unit's name out loud, but the stencils were still on the walls if you knew where to look. They put me on roving patrol the very first night. Level 4, East Corridor, 800 meters of straight concrete lit by flickering fluorescents that hadn't been replaced since the Reagan administration. My battle buddy Travis was posted at the far end. We had NVGs, thermals, the whole kit, and brand new M1-1 radios that were supposed to punch through anything. The duty NCO's exact words were, "Nothing ever happens down here except the occasional rat. Don't fall asleep." So, of course, something happened. It started with the radio, not our frequency, not our net. Old school analog hiss, the kind you only hear in war movies. I was leaning against the wall halfway down the corridor, sipping the last of my Rip-It, when the handset on my chest crackled to life by itself. Red Leg 6, this is Hammer 29er, adjust fire, over. I laughed at first. Travis is from Alabama and loves screwing with Yankees using old radio lingo. I keyed my mic. "Travis, knock it off, man. I'm not in the mood." Nothing but open carrier static. Then the voice came again, louder, edged with something that made the hair on my neck stand straight up. "Hammer 29er, danger close. Grid 774, 292. He, quick, over." That grid meant nothing to me then. Later, I looked it up in the historical overlay. It was the exact map square we were standing under. December 1944, coordinates. I took off running, boots pounding concrete, IOTV slamming against my ribs, 800 meters in under 2 minutes. I got to Travis breathing like I'd just climbed a mountain. He was staring at his own radio handset dangling from its cord, eyes wide, face the color of printer paper. "Danny, I swear on my mama, I never touched the analog band." We both heard it at the same time then. Footsteps. Not ours. Slow, deliberate bootfalls coming toward us from the dark stretch we'd just covered. But when I flipped on my weapon light, the corridor was empty. Just dust hanging in the beam, like smoke. We called it in. The duty officer and sergeant first class showed up 20 minutes later with the master key ring that looked older than both of us combined. They walked the corridor, shining their lights, telling us it was rats chewing wires or residual Eastern Bloc jamming gear still bouncing signals after 30 years. Standard go back to post speech. That's when Travis grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises. "Look," he whispered, "boot prints, fresh ones." Starting right where we'd been standing when the radio call came in, heading away from us down the corridor toward the big blast door at the far end. The door nobody had a key for anymore, the one with the faded stencil that read 333rd FABN, restricted 1945. The prints were deep at the toe, shallow at the heel like whoever made them had been running flat out, and then just stopped. They ended 10 feet from that door. There were no prints coming back. We stood there a long time. The lights hummed overhead. Somewhere far off, a ventilation fan kicked on with a metallic groan that sounded almost human. Travis finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "They ran out of ammo in 44, Danny. Ran out of everything. And they're still trying to adjust fire." I didn't sleep for the rest of the rotation. Every night after that, when the corridor lights dimmed to 50% at midnight, I'd hear it again. Faint, desperate, always the same voice on a frequency nobody used anymore. "Hammer 29er, adjust fire, danger close." I still hear it sometimes, even back in the States. When it's quiet, when the room is cold for no reason, they never found a body to go with those prints. The dust never got disturbed again. But every December, the motion sensors on level 4 still register one set of boots walking that same 800 meters. And stopping 10 feet from a door that hasn't been opened since the war ended. I think they're waiting for someone to bring them ammunition that's never coming. Or maybe they're waiting for permission to stop fighting. Chapter 2. The Choir on Level 5. My name is Staff Sergeant Kayla Brooks, 92F, and I've pumped fuel from Kuwait to Korea without ever blinking at the dark. Fort Bastogne broke that streak. Level 5 is the fuel farm. 4 massive JP-8 bladders the size of city buses, steel catwalks, and rails that once fed 155mm shells straight to the surface guns. After the first couple of incidents, they changed the SOP. Nobody goes down alone. Minimum 4 bodies, 1 NCO, rifles chambered, radios checked every 15 mics. I was the NCO. We took the big freight elevator at 2200 for routine gauge readings. Me, Hernandez, SPC Lee, and a brand new private named Morrison who still smelled like AIT. The doors opened onto air so cold it burned your lungs. The overheads were already flickering like they knew we were coming. We split into pairs. Hernandez and I took tanks 1 and 3. Lee and Morrison took 2 and 4. Standard clockwork drill. Climb the ladder, read the sight glass, log the numbers, and move on. 10 minutes per tank. I was halfway up tank 3 when every light on the level died at once. Not dimmed, not brown out, gone. Total black. The emergency reds kicked in for maybe 5 seconds, then they died too. I've been in caves in Afghanistan where you can at least see the glow of your watch. This was deeper than that. Then the singing started. It came from everywhere and nowhere, like it was inside the concrete itself. Men's voices, 30 or 40 at least, singing Go Down Moses in perfect 4-part harmony. Low, weary, the kind of sound you make when your soul is tired, but you still have to keep marching. I knew every word from my grandmother's church in Savannah, but these men weren't singing for Jesus. They were singing to stay alive. Hernandez was 2 feet below me on the ladder. I felt his hand clamp onto my boot. "Sarge," he whispered, voice cracking. "Tell me you hear that." Before I could answer, one voice rose above the rest, close enough that I smelled wet wool and gunpowder that wasn't there. "Is that the Red Cross truck finally come? We got 11 wounded, need evac bad." The singing never paused. It just kept rolling, verse after verse, like they'd been practicing for 75 years and still weren't done. Hernandez lost it. He jumped off the ladder, hit the deck hard, and ran. I've never seen a man move that fast in full kit. I screamed his name and went after him. My weapon light carved tunnels through the dark, but all I caught were glimpses. Shadows moving between the tanks that were too tall, too thin, wearing helmets I didn't recognize. The singing followed us. Not louder, not faster, just steady, the way you keep a wounded buddy talking so he doesn't pass out. By the time we hit the stairwell, it had switched to wade in the water, and every footstep we took up those metal stairs echoed back with extra boots that weren't ours. We burst onto level 2, gasping, slamming the blast door behind us. Hernandez dropped to his knees right there in front of the duty desk and started crying so hard he couldn't breathe. The duty officer thought we'd been attacked. Took 3 of us to calm Hernandez down enough to talk. He kept saying the same thing over and over. They thought we were coming to get them, Sarge. They've been waiting since 1944 for someone to bring the trucks. They medevaced him out 2 days later. Diagnosis: acute stress reaction with auditory hallucinations. The command tried to write the whole thing off as CO poisoning from a bad heater, except the air quality sensors on level 5 read perfect that night, and 4 separate body cams recorded 37 seconds of clear male voices singing before the batteries mysteriously drained to 0. I went back down the next week with a chaplain and a Belgian major who claimed he didn't believe in ghosts. We found Hernandez's glove still hanging on the ladder where he'd dropped it. The singing didn't start again. Instead, something whispered just once right against my ear, "Thank you for trying, ma'am, but we can't leave our guns." I still have that glove in my footlocker. Sometimes, when I open it late at night, I swear I can smell pine needles and cordite mixed with the fuel residue. And if I listen close, I can just make out the faintest harmony drifting up from somewhere far below. They're still down there, keeping each other awake with the only thing they have left: their voices. Chapter 3. The Man in the Wrong Uniform. My name is Captain Marcus O'Neill, Bravo Company, 1-66 Armor, and I have never written a sworn statement I couldn't stand behind in a court-martial. Until Fort Bastogne. I was the company commander during the winter rotation when EUCOM decided to stress test the deepest level for a possible brigade command post in case Article 5 ever went hot. Level 6. The part of the complex that still had 1940s map boards bolted to the walls and fire direction tables stamped with the screaming eagle of the 106th Infantry Division. The Army's official line was that everything below Level 4 had been gutted and repurposed. That was a lie. I did my commander's walkthrough alone. Officers do that. You want to see what the place really feels like when the enlisted aren't standing at parade rest. I carried a flashlight, my M17, and the master biometric key that opened every door ever welded shut since the Berlin Wall came down. The corridor lights were on motion sensors. They woke up in sections as I moved, then died behind me like a sinking ship, going dark compartment by compartment. I turned into what the old blueprints called Battery Corridor C. The air changed instantly, colder, heavier, smelling of wet wool and cosmoline instead of the usual diesel and ozone. My breath fogged even though the thermostats on the upper levels read 12 degrees Celsius. That was when I saw him. He was kneeling in front of a row of ammunition crates that should not have existed. Black soldier, World War II greatcoat with the hood up, wool trousers tucked into leggings, 333rd Field Artillery patch bright as the day it was sewn. His hands were working a broken entrenching tool, trying to pry the lid off a crate stenciled Charge Propellant M1. 103rd Fireworth. The wood was swollen with decades of damp, but he kept at it with the patience of a man who had nowhere else to be. I froze. My weapon came up to low ready without conscious thought. The flashlight on my rail painted him perfectly. Frost on the shoulders of the coat, a thin layer of ice on the brass buckles, and hands that were wrong, not solid. The edges wavered like heat shimmer, like the harder I tried to focus, the less there was to see. He looked up. His eyes were exhausted, bloodshot, human. "Sir," he said, voice hoarse but steady, "we're down to our last 3 rounds. Krauts are 200 yards west and pushing hard with armor. Can you get a message to the 969th? Tell them we held the ridge as long as we could." I couldn't speak. My throat locked. I remember thinking, absurdly, that his salute was textbook perfect, even though he was missing 2 fingers on his right hand. He stood, slowly. The entrenching tool clattered to the concrete and did not bounce. It just lay there, like it had always belonged. Then he walked straight toward me, not through the wall, through me. I felt every degree of cold that body had carried since 1944 pour into my chest. My heart actually skipped. I smelled snow and cordite and something metallic that might have been blood frozen solid. When my vision cleared, the corridor was empty. The crate was gone. The only thing left was a single set of boot prints in the dust, leading from the spot where he'd been kneeling to the exact place where I was standing. My own boots were inside his prints, heel to heel, like he'd stepped into me and kept walking. I don't know how long I stood there, long enough for the motion lights to time out and drop me into total darkness. I finally got my flashlight back up and swept the beam across the wall. The stencil was still there, faded but legible. 333rd FABN, Fire Direction Center, DEC, 1944. I reported it up the chain the second I reached a working phone. Battalion sent the S2 Major and a Belgian liaison officer. They took my statement, photographed the corridor, and 2 weeks later, the entire level was sealed behind new hydraulic blast doors with biometric locks that rejected even my key. Official explanation: structural failure risk. The Belgian contractor who welded the final plate told my driver, off the record, "We buried good men behind concrete once before. Looks like history likes to repeat." I still have the thermal image one of the investigators pulled from the corridor camera. There's a perfect heat bloom shaped like a man in an overcoat, standing exactly where I stood, looking straight into the lens. The timestamp is 3 minutes after I left the level. I keep that photo in my desk drawer. Sometimes, when the house is quiet, I take it out and look at the face the camera caught in infrared. He's saluting. He's still waiting for the relief column that never came. Chapter 4. The Fire Mission That Never Ended. My name is Specialist Ethan Park, 13B Cannon Crew Member, 427 Field Artillery, and I have plotted more fire missions than I can count. None of them ever plotted themselves until Fort Bastogne. I was attached to the Joint Task Force running backup fire direction drills on Level 4. The Army wanted to prove we could still shoot 155s the old-fashioned way if the Russians ever jammed GPS and took Link 16 offline. They gave us a corner of the level nobody had used since Desert Storm. Dusty plotting boards, paper maps under cracked glass, and an ancient teletype printer that sounded like a dying chainsaw every time it woke up. We ran the exercise in shifts. My crew drew the graveyard, 1800 to 0600, 4 nights straight. The first 2 nights were boring. We shot imaginary missions, drank terrible Belgian instant coffee, and listened to the ventilation fans groan like old men. On the 3rd night, the printer started by itself. It began with a single bell ding. Then the carriage slammed left, and the paper started feeding. None of us touched the power switch. The ribbon was so dry it screamed, but the letters came out crisp and black. MSG. FM Hammer 29. Actual tot repeat. Tot grid 774292 HEQWP. Ilum danger. Close break 11 wino ammo. No food request relay to Redleg 6 over. We stared at it like it was written in blood. The grid was our grid, our exact position, but plotted in the 1944 datum the Army stopped using before any of us were born. The call sign Hammer 29 belonged to a battery of the 333rd that ceased to exist on 17th of December 1944. We laughed it off at first. Someone's idea of a sick joke. Maybe a signal troop upstairs spoofing the ancient hardline. We unplugged the printer, tore the sheet off, and went back to our fake fire missions. 11 minutes later, the printer powered itself back up and spat out the exact same message. Then again, 11 minutes after that. Same words, same spacing, same urgency. 6 hours straight, every 11 minutes on the dot, like a heartbeat that refused to flatline. Around Duro 400, the overhead lights cut out and the emergency phone rang. The red one on the wall, hardwired, no dial tone unless someone physically plugs in upstairs. I was closest. I picked it up. The line was open. I heard wind, distant thumps of outgoing artillery, men shouting coordinates in the background the way my granddad described on old cassette tapes. Then a calm, exhausted voice spoke right into my ear. Hammer 29er to any station, we are overrun. 11 wounded, no ammo, no rations, 3 days. Request permission to displace to secondary positions. Over. Me, Fire Direction Officer Lieutenant Garza, took the handset from me. His hand was shaking. He challenged for authentication using the current day's running password. The voice answered with the correct challenge and password for 18th of December 1944. Garza dropped the phone like it burned him. The cord whipped against the wall and the handset dangled, swinging, still transmitting the sound of men dying in a snowstorm that happened 80 years ago. We evacuated the level in under 4 minutes, left the printer running. When the quick reaction force came down with the colonel an hour later, the paper roll had run out. The last sheet was nothing but one sentence repeated until the ribbon turned gray. Do not forget us, do not forget us, do not forget us. They pulled the plug, boxed the printer, and shipped it to some warehouse in Germany, marked historical artifact. 2 days later, the hardline phone rang again in an empty room. The duty log just says unresolved anomaly. I still have the first printout. I keep it folded in my cargo pocket like a rabbi carries a prayer. Sometimes when I'm on a range and the guns go quiet between fire missions, I swear I can hear that teletype bell ding in the distance, counting down another 11 minutes. They never got the order to displace. They never got resupplied. They never got permission to quit. So the mission keeps coming, every 11 minutes, forever. And somewhere under the Ardennes, a battery that no longer exists is still adjusting fire on an enemy that isn't there anymore, waiting for a forward observer who will never call shot over and let them stand down. I think that's the definition of eternal guard duty. Chapter 5, The Ones Who Never Came Up. My name is Sergeant First Class Isaiah Washington, and I was the last platoon sergeant to walk out of Fort Bastogne with my roster still intact. 2 names were crossed off in pencil before we loaded the buses. It happened on a routine inventory run to level 5. The fuel farm had to be gauged, and the ammo crates spot-checked every 72 hours, no exceptions. I sent PFC Morrison and SPC Lang down together because they were both rock-solid Joes. Morrison was a quiet kid from Oregon who could deadlift 4 plates and never complained. Lang was a former Marine who latched on to the Army after Fallujah left him half-deaf in one ear. They signed for 2 rifles, 2 NVG sets, 2 radios, and 1 thermal monocular. I watched the elevator doors close on them at 1945. By 2345, they had missed 2 radio checks. By 0100, we had a full QRF spinning up. Me, 2 squad leaders, the Belgian liaison, and a pair of their military working dogs that looked more wolf than dog. We found their gear first. Rifles stacked muzzle up against Tank 2 like they were turning them in at the arms room. Body armor folded neat. Plates removed and laid side by side. Helmets on top, NVGs still attached, batteries dead, radios sitting on the catwalk, squelch broken, transmitting nothing but open carrier hiss. No blood, no scuffle marks, no footprints leading away in any direction. The dogs tracked their scent straight across the cavern to the west bulkhead. That wall used to be a tunnel mouth, an emergency exit the Germans dug in 1944 that connected to their Siegfried Line bunkers. NATO filled it solid with reinforced concrete in 1959. The dogs reached the wall, sat on their haunches, and started howling like they were mourning. Would not move. Would not stop. I put my hand on the concrete. It was colder than the air, colder than metal should ever be. Then I heard it. Scratching, slow, deliberate fingernails on the inside of the wall. Not frantic, patient, like whoever was on the other side had all the time in the world and knew we didn't. A voice came through the concrete, muffled but clear enough to understand every word. Sarge, we held the line like you ordered. Can we come up now? I lost my military bearing right there. I slammed my fist against the wall and yelled, Morrison, Lang, that you? Silence for 10 full seconds. Then the same voice, softer, almost embarrassed. We don't know those names anymore, Sarge. Just tell us when the relief gets here. The dogs went berserk. The Belgian handler had to drag them away by their collars. My squad leaders were looking at me like I was about to order a breaching charge on a wall 3 meters thick. I wanted to. God help me, I wanted to tear that wall down with my bare hands. Instead, I called it in. The colonel himself came down with the provost marshal. They searched every inch of level 5 and 6 with drones, robots, ground-penetrating radar. Nothing. No heat signatures, no voids, no bodies. Just that neat stack of gear and 2 sets of boot prints that walked to the wall and never walked back. Command declared them AWOL pending investigation. Then, 48 hours later, the status changed to missing, presumed non-recoverable. No ceremony, no memorial. Just 2 empty wall lockers and a pair of boots nobody ever polished again. I stood guard myself the night before. We exfilled, alone, rifle loaded, every light on the level burning bright. At 0255, the scratching started again. Same rhythm, same voice. Let us out, Sarge. We did our job. I pressed my forehead to the concrete and whispered the only thing I could think to say. I relieve you. The scratching stopped instantly. For one heartbeat, the wall felt warm under my skin, like a hand pressing back from the other side. Then the cold rushed in again, colder than before. When the buses rolled out the next morning, the Belgian guards took over elevator security. They told our driver they would only patrol down to level 3 from now on. Anything deeper belonged to the forest. Every December since, the motion sensors on levels 5 and 6 still register 2 additional bodies moving in perfect battle roster intervals. They walk from the elevator to the west bulkhead, pause for exactly 11 minutes, then walk back. The cameras never catch them. The dogs still refuse to go below level 4. Morrison and Lang never made formation topside, but every winter, when the fog rolls thick and the temperature drops, 2 more soldiers report for duty in a place the Army no longer admits exists. They are still holding the line, and the line is exactly where they left it. Chapter 6. The Relief That Never Arrived. My name is Chief Warrant Officer 3, Nathan Crow, UH-60M pilot, 145th Aviation Regiment, and I have never refused a mission in 15 years of flying. Until the night Fort Bastogne asked me to land inside a mountain. We were the last Black Hawk on the rotation, tasked with medevac standby and occasional resupply runs to the underground pads. The Army built 2 retractable elevator platforms deep enough to swallow a Hawk whole. Rotors folded so we could move birds below ground if the balloon ever went up. Nobody had used them since the Cold War ended. Then, one February, the order came down. Test the system. Full hot load. Night vision only. I took my co-pilot, CW2 Alvarez, and a crew of 2. We launched out of Chievres at 0200 under a moon so thin it barely painted the treetops. The plan was simple. Descend to the surface pad outside Bastogne. Get swallowed by the big freight elevator. Power down on level 4. Prove the concept. Come back up at dawn. Easy 9 line, no threat, no drama. We touched down on the pad. The Belgian ground crew waved us forward onto the steel deck. The elevator started its descent with a groan that vibrated through the airframe like a dying animal. 6 levels down took 4 full minutes. When the doors opened onto level 4, every light in the hangar was already on, waiting for us. That was the first wrong thing. The second was the formation. 23 soldiers stood at perfect parade rest in front of our parking spot. World War II winter uniforms, overcoats buttoned to the throat, leggings, M1 helmets with the old netting. Black troops, every one of them. 333rd Field Artillery shoulder patches bright as new. They were arranged in 3 ranks, exactly the way a 1940s battery would form up for inspection. No one moved. No one breathed frost in the cold air. Alvarez whispered over intercom, "Chief, you seeing this?" I was. And I was seeing the ground guides, too. 2 soldiers in the front rank holding chem lights, red and green, moving us forward with perfect hand and arm signals, like they'd practiced on this exact deck every day since 1944. I taxied forward on instinct. The moment our skids crossed the yellow line, the formation snapped a salute in perfect unison. 23 right hands, missing fingers, frostbitten, transparent at the edges, rose to helmet brims that cast no shadow under the floodlights. My crew chief, Sergeant First Class Kim, came over intercom so calm it scared me more than panic would have. "Sir, the rotor wash isn't touching them. Not even their coats are moving." I shut down anyway. Procedure is procedure. Engines spooled to idle, rotors coasting, and I opened the door. The smell hit first. Snow, pine, burning powder, and something sweet underneath, like frozen blood left too long in the cold. The nearest soldier, a staff sergeant with a face older than my grandfather, stepped forward 1 pace and spoke in a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. "Welcome to the position, sir. We've been expecting relief." I couldn't answer. My mouth wouldn't work. He continued like he was reading from a script he'd memorized across 8 decades. "We held the ridge. Ammunition expended. 11 wounded. 3 KIA. Request permission to stand down and evacuate casualties." Behind him, the formation never wavered. I saw a private in the second rank cradling his left arm, the sleeve soaked dark, even though no blood dripped. Another soldier had half his face burned away, yet he held the salute like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Alvarez unstrapped and came around the nose. He stopped dead when he saw them. The staff sergeant turned to him and nodded, respectful, almost relieved. "You the new battery commander?" Alvarez managed one word. "No." The staff sergeant's shoulders sagged, just a fraction, the way a man does when he hears the same bad news for the 1,000th time. Then we'll maintain fire watch until you are. He stepped back into ranks. The formation executed a perfect right face. Then they marched, boots striking concrete that made no sound, straight toward the closed blast doors at the far end of the hangar, the doors that had been welded shut the week before. They walked through the steel like it was fog. The lights cut out the instant the last man vanished. Total black. The aircraft battery died with them. No instruments, no radios, no nothing. Just the smell of snow inside a mountain and 23 sets of boot prints in the dust that ended at solid metal. We sat in the dark for 6 hours until the Belgians manually cranked the elevator back to the surface. They found us sitting on the ramp, doors open, staring at nothing. The Army scrubbed the mission, classified the footage, reassigned the crew to different continents. My bird got a new tail number and a fresh coat of paint like nothing ever happened. I still have the flight log. One line written in my handwriting with a shaking pen. Relief column arrived, relief denied. Every year on the anniversary, I get a single text from a blocked number, same message, same time. Battery still in position, awaiting orders. I never answer. There is no order I can give that will let them stop. Chapter 7. The Final Transmission. My name is Sergeant Aurora Vega, 25U Signal Support, and I was the last American soldier to touch the comms panel on Level 6 before they sealed Fort Bastogne forever. They sent me down alone because I held the only remaining crypto key that could talk to the 1958 analog backbone. The order was simple. Pull the hard drives, wipe the servers, cut every cable, then flood the comms vault with thermite granules. Make sure nothing down there ever speaks again. I took the freight elevator at 0300 with a Belgian captain who refused to go past level 3. He handed me the master key and said, in perfect English, "When you are finished, drop this in the shaft. The mountain will keep the rest." Then the doors closed, and I dropped into silence. Level 6 was already dark. Emergency strips glowed faint red, just enough to see the old consoles. Vacuum tube radios the size of refrigerators, reel-to-reel recorders, a wall of patch panels labeled in faded stencil, Red Leg 6, Hammer 2-9, Observer Posts 1-6. Everything was coated in decades of dust except one station. One station was clean, chair pulled out, headset resting on the desk like someone had just stepped away for coffee. I started with the hard drives, unscrewed, bagged, labeled, then the cables, snip, pull, coil, tag, routine destruction. I was on the third rack when the console in front of me woke up by itself. Green screen, block letters, no cursor blink. Incoming flash traffic from Hammer 2-9, actual 2. Any station this net message follows. I froze. The room temperature dropped so fast my breath crystallized. The screen kept typing. We have held the Ridge ammunition expended wounded evacuated to rear request permission to withdraw and reform standing by. I stared at it for a long time. Then I did the only thing 15 years of Army training had never prepared me for. I sat down, put on the headset, and keyed the mic. This is Fort Bastogne Comms, Sergeant Vega speaking. Authentication not required. Stand by. Static. Then a voice. Calm. Professional, exhausted beyond measure. Fort Bastogne, this is Hammer 2-9er Actual. Good to hear a friendly voice. We've been calling for a long time. I swallowed ice. Copy Hammer 2-9er. What is your status? A pause. In the background, I heard wind, distant shelling, men coughing. 11 effectives left. Frostbite critical. No food, no charges, no hope. But the line is intact. Germans never took the ridge. My hand hovered over the thermite switch. I couldn't press it. Hammer 2-9er, you are relieved. Silence so complete I heard my own heart. Say again, Fort Bastogne. You held. You did your duty. The war is over. You are ordered to stand down. That is a direct order from United States Army authority. Acknowledge. Another pause. Then the softest sound I have ever heard, like 23 men exhaling at once. Order acknowledged. Hammer 2-9er standing down. The console went dark. Every bulb, every tube, every relay died at the same instant. The temperature rose so fast my coveralls went from stiff to damp in seconds. I smelled pine and snow melting into spring earth. I finished the destruction anyway, cut the last cables, poured the granules, pulled the pin. The vault lit up orange and white, and I walked out while the past burned behind me. When the elevator reached topside, the Belgian captain was waiting. He looked past me into the empty shaft. "Are they gone?" he asked. I handed him the master key. It was warm. "They're going home," I said. He nodded once and dropped the key into the darkness. We never heard it hit bottom. 6 months later, a farmer outside Stavelot plowed up 23 rusted dog tags in a perfect straight line, exactly battery interval apart. No bones, no helmets, just the tags, cleaned and polished like they'd been shined that morning. Every name belonged to the 333rd Field Artillery Battalion, missing since December 1944. They finally came up from the mountain, and the mountain let them go.